that's what happens when you're starting a batch of compost tea. So this is a 10-gallon brewer from Growing Solutions. So this is like the baby of the line. They do a whole array of them, but I've just been nuts about these brewers since, gosh, 1995, and we started using them at our nursery. So the neat thing about them is each of these little aeration discs has over 2,000 little tiny pinprick holes. So that's how you get the aeration in through the compost. So we showed you what that looks like, but it's all going to change now because I'm going to add a nice combination of compost. So I just grabbed some really nice biodynamic compost from Seacoast, and I'm mixing that with actually another heat-produced compost, a thermophilic compost. It's a little dry, but I know from testing it, even though it's dry, there's so much microbial activity. So now it's kind of getting pre-moistened and blended. So some of the very best teas I've made over the years are a combination of a really good vermicompost or worm castings, mixed like 50-50 with a really great thermophilic compost, such as these two, which are just full of a diversity of organisms. And the feedstocks of the compost are really important. Whether they're mesophilic, like made in a worm, or if they're basically thermophilic, made in a windrow or another controlled composting system. So you can read more about that on our website if you like. But this is a pretty simple machine, the little machine. We've got aeration only from the bottom of the tank, as you saw with that disc. In the larger machines, you would want an additional aeration source, because the objective is to get as much air through the compost basket as possible so that you can get this shearing of the beneficial organisms and all the soluble nutrients off the compost and out into the hot tub. So the other thing I'm going to do is add a little heater, a little aquarium heater. I'm going to set it to 72 degrees. I'm going to slide that in there. And I'm going to remember when the tea is done to unplug that first. So at least it's got a high temperature shut off and it's not going to like melt down the universe. So it's a basic setup. You can just stick the lid on. And again, this is only a little 10-gallon brewer, but we'll be able to brew this at 72 degrees. And I actually preheated the water and there's no chlorine in it. So pre-treating the water, so pure water source, really good compost. And I almost forgot the compost tea catalyst. So the catalyst is a nutritive source for the microorganisms. And so I'm going to sprinkle that in. And I could have put the air on before, but it's going to solubilize instantly. And that's a combination of azomite rock dust and some soluble kelp, humic and fulvic acids, and then some kind of secret sauce botanical extracts. So the idea here is we want to grow the organisms, but we only want to grow the most aerobic organisms that are thriving in all this oxygen, and we want them to be as diverse as possible. That's why we've been so careful checking our compost sources and doing compost tests. So we know from these lots of compost what we should get over a 20 to 24 hour brew at 72 degrees. At the end of the brew cycle, then we're going to unplug it, let it settle for a minute, and we can take it off here and go ahead and utilize it in at about a 20% solution and water all of our plants with it. So I'm going to turn this on because it's getting noisy because the car is pulling up. So the lid is going on. And then what's really fun is checking this in just a few hours, like 8 hours. And if it's as active as I know it's going to be, there will be all sorts of bubbles coming up through here. It'll look like a root beer float underneath. So that's a sign that you've got a really good brew going on. So anyway, that's the real basics of brewing compost tea.